Ready? Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays, where we cover everything Dynamics great and small. So, welcome back, everybody, for an October 6th episode of our podcast, or as Bart calls it, the show. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Bart is off doing college visits with his son. So, in substitution, we have another colleague of ours, Bill Whalen, and they'll be subbing for Bart. So to kick it off, Bill, we traditionally start off with a fantastic dad joke. So you got anything for me?
I am a dad. I have 4 teenagers, so
Okay.
It's a lot of punishment right now. But why can't the T-Rex clap today?
I know it's not because his hands are in his wallet or in his pockets to get his wallet.
Probably
right?
not.
Yeah, I don't know. What is it? Yeah.
It's because he's extinct.
Okay. You definitely belong here, Bill. That was awful and awfully good. Okay, I got one that's really bad too. So how much does a neutron pay for electricity?
Ooh. 0? I don't know.
Very good. It's no charge.
Yeah, no charge.
Neutron. Okay. Again, I hope the content's better than our jokes. So what do you got for me?
All right. So first off, in Power Pages, we're going to talk about some updates to how sites can be created and how those licenses get aligned. So the reason for this change is mainly because up until this point, if you had an add-on based website, the creation experience was still a little bit different. So those experiences have been unified now. So you can create a website from Power Pages and then assign the appropriate license. So, trying to bring all the Power Platform stuff together into the same experiences. Next is a public preview of some connector enhancements. This is actually a really good deal because, anytime we have connectors in play, we want to be able to try to standardize the implementation of them. We don't want to rely on user accounts for those things to be able to be maintained and operated. So this adds the ability for service principal accounts, not user accounts, to be leveraged for custom connectors, as well as Azure Key Vault functionality. You also have the ability to add environment variables to more things in policy management. Previously, it was only a couple of specific features or functions that you could pass variables into. Now they've expanded that, so you have a bit more control. Next up is a really awesome enhancement for Power Pages focused on virtual tables. So if you want to add a SharePoint list or SQL Server to build out a Power Page site, you'd have to go through some extra hoops and jumps to do that through Dataverse. Now, directly from Power Pages, you can actually add those virtual tables, and it does all the work for you. So again, trying to make the design experience in Studio as efficient and clickless as possible. So that's just right at your fingertips now, which is a big deal.
That's very cool.
Yeah. On the CLI side, if you're not familiar with CLI it's basically a command line interface to allow developers to have control at a command line. So there's some nice updates to how you can manage tenant settings and list tenants. There's some really cool updates to creating Dataverse connections directly from a CLI. So this just gives our developers a lot more power to interact, do CRUD operations against these Dataverse connections, whereas they would have had to do this from the PowerMaker experience previously. There's also a few additional features that are more minor, but I would definitely check out the capability of creating those Dataverse connections from the CLI. When I joined Microsoft, people always ask me, like, how do I learn and how do I get up to speed on all these capabilities? You'll notice we're going out to a couple different spots today, one of which is the Learn site. A couple of neat features that have been released for Excel. Previously, we had automation capabilities to call Power Automate directly from Excel, but the capabilities were a little bit limited. This expands on that, and now you can both build and execute flows, both templated flows and flows that you have already built, or create new ones right from Excel. So it allows you to extend that automation even further if you're using Excel on the web. Learning paths for Copilot. Back a few months back, we announced at Microsoft Build the ability for our ISV partners and developers, our customers, to build out copilots themselves. We're starting to see that come to fruition. And part of the ways we want to make sure that that can get into the community is through learning paths. So I would encourage folks to go take a look at these. This is how a lot of us learn here at Microsoft, other than all the hands-on we tend to do. But these learning paths are designed to get people up to speed on how to leverage Copilot, how to build things around them. And in Power Apps, that's going to become even more and more a big part of what we see is how the development platform and the Maker Portal doing as much as you can with less, and that means no code. Copilots are going to be a huge part of that, as well as extending into things like AI Builder even further. Next up, we've got development environment. So a very common question I feel like we get from a Power Platform perspective is how do I administer this thing and make sure it's done in a way that's governed appropriately, that's managed functionally. So previously, creating environments could be a little bit difficult in terms of, if I wanted to create an environment for a user, a lot of folks want to limit the ability for users to create their own environments. So this feature gives you the ability to enable developer environments for users. So if you're a global admin or a Power Platform administrator, you can enable app makers by now provisioning a developer environment for them. It's also going to feed into things like ALM down the road. So as your pipelines and software management cycles kick in, these environments would be able to push features into those pipelines for production testing and release. Now, one is a big deal because I know a lot of folks, they think a lot about how do I manage all this stuff that's out there. Power Pages, again, coming back to Power Pages, new inclusion of Power Pages ALM cycles into GA, as well as enhanced data models. This was a private preview feature. We'll talk about ALM a few times today for folks not familiar with that terminology. It's really the ability to manage your development lifecycle from inception or idea to delivery. We're integrating pipelines, and if you're a DevOps customer of Microsoft's or using GitHub, you can also integrate those automation tactics in. So the more and more you see pipelines showing up in Power Pages and Power Apps, that's going to just tighten up how your software development lifecycle is connected into Power Apps and Power Pages. So great inclusions because we want to make sure that there's not separate processes for people to develop and take those features they're building into production. Next up, we've got, I lost my way a little bit. Connections as plugins. So I mentioned the Microsoft Build conference that was happening a few months ago. There's some new capabilities that are released into limited preview focused around our ISV and developer partners building or extending their existing connectors and apps into Copilot. So this is a huge feature, and it's the first thing we're starting to see allowing people to really take advantage of the code they've built and then tap into Copilots. So the example you see here, Desk 365 is a help desk solution. They had an existing connector on the Power Platform that they leveraged. And imagine if you see at the bottom of my screen, I have this little pre-release Copilot button. So if I click on that, it pops up, right? Now I can ask it a question. But what people really want to do is start to extend these features into their environment. So we have 1,000+ connectors in Power Platform. Any of those connected systems can now take advantage of these copilots across the different ecosystems in Microsoft. So that's going to be a huge deal. I hit the button, I ask it a question about, say, my help desk system, and because that connector can now talk to the Copilot infrastructure, it can provide me an answer without having to open that application. So it just further extends your desktop, your other applications that leverage Copilot to allow fingertip access to answers so that no matter where a user is at, they can get their job done. Now, secondarily,
super clever.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's super clever. It really is. So, anyways, just go ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Similarly, we're also extending that for people that are building OpenAI plugins. So the example that you see on the linked page is something tapping into like an Instacart feature. They have an API, for instance, that says, hey, I want to make a certain recipe. What do I need for that? So there's already a function for that. Somebody's built an OpenAI plugin, and now you can just tap into that and extend it. So really looking for ways to allow developers to take advantage of Copilot and all the really great AI technology that we're rolling out to the community. Really cool stuff. This week, Power Apps had a ton of announcements because of the second annual Power Platform Conference. If you're not familiar with what that was or is, I'd encourage you to go bang it and see what sort of resources you can find. Tons of announcements around Copilot in general and trying to make that even more powerful for our end users and app builders. There's a lot of things being rolled out for application governance, because with any low code tool, that's one of the main concerns that IT has. And then we're continuing to modernize the experience in the UI. And one of the features that was rolled out is something called Advisor. I'll get to that right here. It's a advisor tech that allows us to understand, like from a governance perspective, what apps are being used and not being used, what users are inactive, and Power Platform Advisor is going to start to elevate visibility for administrators so that they know who's using what and what assets are potentially aging out that they need to remove. That's a big deal because, you know, if you open up a low code environment to your community, it can kind of get out of control or spider web, but we want to bring that sanity to the picture and allow people to have a better sense of what's out there and what should or should not be in the hands of all users in the environment. All right, next up, we've got Power Pages going to Bootstrap. You know, kind of a minor feature, but we always want to keep up to date. So one of the values of low code platforms is you don't have to care about what version of Bootstrap you're on, what version of XYZ UI toolkit you're running, because we keep that up to date. So it's now, you know, going to be updated as part of the platform, and you do have some choices, so you can decide when you want certain things to be turned on and off. But at some point after this exits preview, it will be a default function that's turned on out of the box. And again, that's just related to standardizing some of those UI kits and how they get deployed. More around Power Pages rather with Copilot. Really, what you're going to see with Copilot is extending functions that build out features faster. So things like, you know, describe and build. You're going to see a lot of capabilities that allow more functionality to be leveraged. The initial rollout, some of these Copilots were very straightforward and basic, like make me an app that does X or a website that does X. But now you'll be able to start to interact during the build process, where if you want to set up things like you see here, multi-step forms, or leveraging things like visual code for the web, Copilot will plug directly into that now and extend features that previously would have had to been done more bespoke or manually. Next up, we've got features that extend the data landscape in Power Platform. One of the big challenges we tend to see and hear our customers talk about is the fact that the data they have obviously is in all kinds of different places. You got ERP systems and customer service and sales, and you've got, you know, the T drive where documents and data live, and SharePoint sites. Well, the more you can start to bring those things into frame, so the better you're going to be able to service your customer and your users internally and externally. So we're extending that to allow for connectivity to Microsoft OneLake. Probably what some people might be even more excited about is being able to link directly to Microsoft Fabric. If you're not familiar with Fabric, it's really an evolution of our business intelligence platforming, which extends itself beyond just Power BI and some of the components like Synapse. It really gives you a link to data warehousing and data lakes that previously would take a lot of time and effort to build. So very kind of a big deal, allowing Fabric connectivity, but it just gives you a straighter path to get from data in an app to you know, something that you want to realize value on through dashboards and reporting. All right, so that wraps up our Power Platform updates. We're going to move over to customer engagement, which, as a reminder, consists of sales, our marketing platform, customer service, and field service. The first thing I want to bring to people's attention is a launch event we have coming up. So the Dynamics 365 Biz Apps launch will cover all of the upcoming things in the next cycle. October 1st marks the beginning of Wave 2 for 2023, which means there will be a lot of features starting to roll out. So you can attend this event to get an idea of what exactly is coming, where AI is going to start to be even more available and extended, and beyond. This is a great event to just learn what's coming and start to plan for it. If you're not familiar with how to find out some of this information, there's also tools like our Release Campaign Manager, where you can build your own release list where you're tracking certain features and you can get notified when things do go to production. The registration is open now. I believe the event is on October 25th. You're hearing a lot about AI and Copilot, and obviously we want people to start using this technology. Microsoft, we are eating our own dog food. So we rolled Copilot out in our customer service environments to try to see more or less kind of what's the impact in terms of value to our business stakeholders on the customer service side. We have lots of different groups, obviously. Some of these statistics that were pulled out of that exercise, and this came from, I believe, our Chief Revenue Officer. So they did some analysis on how that digital transformation transformed into actual value. The couple of stats that were released initially were chat cases or cases that came in, they observed a 12% reduction in average handle time as a result of Copilot availability. That's a huge deal. So imagine being able to increase the amount of volume you can handle by that amount just because you have an assistant ready to go. The other metric that was interesting is being able to resolve cases faster. So how that happened was 10% of cases usually required an external third party, meaning a subject matter expert or another team member to jump in to help answer questions, could now be resolved independently without additional assistance. That's a big deal. It also means that trainability and ramp time is less, so your customer service teams can leverage Copilot to see those benefits right away. Some detailed features on customer service. We've got new outbound calling capabilities. So you can queue up calls dialed if you're doing follow-ups or potentially, following up on voicemails as a customer service rep. It's all right inside the UI where you can initiate the calls. There's callback capabilities as well. And then just with a single click, make that phone call and log the activity in the timeline. And then last but not least, customization for the field service mobile app. So there's some best practices documented here that talk about when and how to customize. The first thing is you want to make sure you use the baseline app. If you're not familiar with some of the changes happening with field service, in August, we released a pretty significant update to the field service product in general, which included a new modernized mobile application, inclusion of a Copilot where you can even create work orders directly from from Outlook emails, because a lot of times dispatchers are getting emails saying, hey, I need somebody out this day. And now you can do that right from your email, which is great. So lots of cool capabilities in field service. And with the common theme of customization, we want to make sure people have access to the tools to make that their own. These are standardized components. There are also going to be capabilities around low code as well to customize the mobile app for your use cases. But lots of cool stuff rolling out in field service. I'd encourage folks to check it out. With that, we're going to flip it over to Dan, and he's going to take us through some F&O and other capabilities that have released.
Just give me a second. I'll flip this over. Let me know when you can see everything, Bill.
We got it.
All right. So we have a 10.0.37 update coming. So we'll be talking a little bit about that for commerce, platform, and finance. I'll do the supply chain, some other features on the following, because it gets too long sometimes on the show. So given that, let's start out with some commerce. So they made an announcement for the Commerce Copilot. I mentioned this before on a previous show, but this is an official announcement for the Commerce Copilot. And this is really nice because I don't know about you, but I have a hard time writing copy for for anything that I actually have to write or be persuasive or whatever it might be, right? Some people are really skilled at it. Sometimes you get a writer's block or can't write it. So actually doing these things is going to be really easy with these copilots, because it's built in both to the commerce B2B and the B2C platform for that. So if you want to tell it to write something that is like copy this, like write it adventurous or luxurious or like an 8th grader, right? It'll tell you, it's like how long you want it to be. It's like, how many paragraphs and things like that. So that's kind of a super nice built-in feature to be able to manage that. And also it's like, it'll write that engaging content. It'll also allow you to modify and review that content before it's set out. So simplifies everything to save everybody a ton of time and the things they'd expect it to do, right?
I discourage people from using the 8th grader tone, just having an 8th grader. I don't know that would be as effective as it should be.
Okay, that's your second dad joke today, right? So yeah, I mean, eighth graders like, nah, they're not going to do it anyways. So yeah, anyways, let's go to Commerce for 10.0.37. So on Commerce 10.0.37, not a ton of features, just one, right? And it's really just a workspace. And as we all know, within the headquarters of Commerce, that uses the F&O, finance and supply chain code base for the headquarters, right? And of course, we know it's a headless commerce engine. But this allows the aggregated payments, right? So from that workspace, you can simplify the analysis of all the payments, the configs, all the comparisons across all the different legal entities or the business units. So it just makes it a whole lot simpler instead of having to make some custom screens or custom workspaces. And it's like, you all know, it's like I'm a big advocate of the workspace because it pushes information to you that you may not have to dig for or won't know that it actually exists. So not a ton of updates within Commerce 10.0.37, but a really nice one and a very functionally usable one for Commerce. Now, for Business Central, I've talked about the previews for months and months, right? And all of this stuff is GA now available in 23. So I'm not going to go through the details of this, but all the stuff that I've talked about in the Power Platform for the links and the Dataverse and the virtual tables, stuff that we had earlier in finance and supply chain now that's available to you. The templates and the Power BI components. On the application, all kinds of stuff for finance, consolidated financial information, intercompany stuff, APAR, approvals, journal stuff. So all of that stuff is going to be GA available in October. Some co-pilots innovations, so as the bank reconciliation with the co-pilot, which is a big deal because that is just it's just busy work, matching those up and make sure that they rec within a certain tolerance, right? And then, this has been out before I announced it with the marketing text context suggestions. It's not unlike the stuff that we have in Commerce, but it's actually within Business Central to actually write those descriptions within the item master under that. A ton of things for regional, country and regional. Now, all the stuff for like, electronic invoicing and things for Europe, all kinds of like bank transfers, all kinds of things like that, things in Denmark and so on and so forth. But as you know, it's like there's so many more countries and localizations for a smaller package like Business Central than there are for finance and supply chain. So if you're thinking about like, doing a global rollout and of finance and supply chain, and you have some smaller countries that just like, just have a few employees there or a small operation there, you might want to consider using Business Central, of course, because it's like all the natural localizations in there, and using intelligent order management to actually coordinate all the intercompany buying and selling and coordination of those goods. Lots of updates on the AL, language in that, and we've talked about like hints and overlays on the last section that we did. So all of this stuff is GA in October here. So for your analysis, the governance on that is like management. Bill was hitting on some of that stuff with the Power Platform, but the granular administration stuff, the include exclude tables for migration, so on and so forth, legislations, components, onboarding, reporting. So lots and lots of updates. I want to go through all of this because you can read it on your own if you're a Business Central aficionado, but there's a lot of updates for this October 23 release. So let's go back to human resources. So human resources, remember, we replatformed human resources over this last year to go from its standalone solution and bring it back into the fold, into the finance and supply chain environment or tenant. With that. And so that's getting done. Now we're actually putting some more components back into this. It's like now we're going to have access to employee leave and absence through Teams. So if you want to look up, like enter your time, so if you're project operations for stock-based products, you can do this through Teams. Or if you want to see what your PTO or time off is, all of that's available through a Teams widget onto there now. So a nice feature there. So not too much with human resource and Teams. Now, this next one is kind of interesting, especially for you developers. So now we have a unified trial for developer environments, right, for F&O. Now, historically, you've only had two choices to run these dev environments. So you could actually run a virtual on-premise one. So you could actually download, get a virtual, get all those VMs, do your dev environment like on your desktop. And the second thing is like, use your Azure subscription and do a VM and put it on there and actually do all your dev work there. So, but on that, it's like you get like Azure consumptions. You'd have to watch that consumption. So you shut up and off and on all the time. Right now, we're offering a simplified way of doing that now. So, and that had to be done through LCS. Now we can actually go through Power Platform Admin Center. Now everything is migrating eventually away from LCS, the Lifecycle Services, and over to the Power Platform Admin Center, which has been the universe of CE and the Power Platform since the beginning. But we're in the One Dynamics, we're moving everything over to that Power Platform. And now we can directly deploy those environments, that unified environments, from the Power Platform, right? And so now you have a fast creation. You can actually include that new sandbox. We can do F&O, we can do supply chain, we can do the project ops components of that. It has all the full dual write components. It has all the virtual tables and the business events pre-installed. So you can use that immediately. So we're simplifying that experience. And I remember back in 2016, 2017, it took forever to get these things up and running and configured, and we're simplifying that across the board. So that's a kind of a big deal for that unified developer environment, right? And we've been able to coordinate all of that management across that. Now, platform updates. Usually, when I have a big platform update, there's tons and tons of things. But again, this is like it's a pretty light for platform as well. So only one update in this, and it's actually a pretty small update. It's just a job history cleanup. Now, there's defaulted to 90 days for any like job history cleanup batches that you have. We just made it available, so it's like instead of just defaulting at 90 days and you're stuck with 90 days, we can delete it earlier to kind of clean up your environment and use less resources on that. So, not much on the cross-platform, updates onto that. Which brings us to finance, and usually there's a ton of things in finance on a big update like this. So this is November 23 update, and not a ton of stuff. So a couple major things. So accounts payable. So we have a default option for approved on the invoice register. So typically that's a workflow approval. So it's like somebody's going to invoice or send that invoice register. It's going to go to a controller or somebody else to actually go through approval. And it's always gone through an approval process. Well, sometimes companies are small and they don't actually want to go through that approval process. It's like, okay, it's just, privately held company. We don't have to do anything like that. So we can actually set it to optional instead of mandatory for that field for who is approved by. And that way, if it's blank, it's optional, and it's actually going to go through and automatically go through the approval for whoever enters that. So, and again, that's not GAP compliant. So be careful when you do something like that, but that is available, right? And there's also a VAT tax declaration, which is going to kind of lead into some of the localizations, right? So this is a value-added tax declaration for Denmark, and it actually has that XML format that goes directly to that Dutch agency. So, basically, it's just it's regulatory compliance within that reporting, which kind of brings us back to the next statement or the next components into this, right? So first of all, the cash and bank management. So we're going to import that bank statement according to that ISO 20022 for advanced bank reconciliation configurations. Now this is a standard format. It's International Standards Committee, I think, has put these together. So these are the encrypted standards for how we actually work between different banking or financial institutions across that. So you're going to see a lot of these. You're going to see this is in credit transfer and direct debit for the ISO 22s, right? So we see that going back and forth. That's like for all the electronic invoicing that is all over Europe, and probably going to come to the U.S. sometime soon, if I had hazard a guess. We also have some matching detail for the vendor invoices, right? So it's like actually specific control over that. It used to be just at the header level, just to make sure that you match those invoices correctly. Now we have it down at like any individual field or line level, because there might be rounding. So you might buy nails at like a fraction of a cent, and how we're going to round these things up, right? And I think they made a whole movie about the roundup thing with the penny. Wasn't that called Office Space, Bill? Yeah.
No, I think that was about multifunction printers.
Something like that, yeah. The penny roundup, right? So anyways, so again, some ISO 2022, transfer format for Italy, for Norway, all these different things. So those are pretty much financial regulatory compliance issues. Now, the last thing is like we can apply prepayments to vendor invoices, right? So this is for Italy, and so they have different regions have different criteria, like how you're able to do your financials, or FASB 52, I guess in Europe for those financial compliance. Now, applying the prepayment can no longer requires that the sales tax group and item tax group fields are set to the invoice line, because this is a prepayment, because you're not going to do that until actually it is fully shipped out for paid, right? And so remember, you have the groups for this, like the item tax versus the sales tax is what it's really going to be for the real tax. And the prepayment transaction results are recorded in the Italian sales book tax section, so they can report on that at the time. So again, for a big update like 10.0.37, not a ton of stuff going on, because we're investing so much into these co-pilots, and that I think we're going to see a lot more coming up. So that's it for content. A couple things on, like as Bart always goes through, well, what's new in the solution updates. So go to your admin center, look for these updates, make sure you stay up to date with all the different apps or components that are in your Power Platform. You can look for some new details for some updates in the D365 Admin Center. The release versions is kind of Bill was alluding to earlier in the section. Some customer insight informations, right, on these updates. And the last thing is, and Bill mentions, like register for the business launch event, October 25th, right? Now, this is not only for CE. If you notice, there's finance and operations, there's project operations, there's across the whole board. I mean, they're going to have the remote assist, anything that was in the Dynamics umbrella. I'm sure there'll be some content for you. And don't forget to register for Ignite November 14th through 17th. Again, we're out of COVID, so you get to go live now. So with that, Bill, that is all the content that we had for this 2 weeks, for this fortnight.
Beautiful. I'd encourage everybody to go get a pumpkin spice latte. Happy October.
Yeah, it's like there's no chance I'll be doing that, so it's a pretty good dad joke to end with, Bill. So see everybody in a fortnight. Thanks.